Okay. Feel free to turn on your own workflows and follow along if you're in a position where you can. I know sometimes, being able to do multiple things on the screen is not always possible, but as I just started the recording, this training is being recorded, so I will post it on YouTube. So if you feel the need to revisit, anything, you can do so with workflows open. And there's past, workshops up there as well. So, and there are also, various cheat sheets and things like that, which I will send you some links to after the training. So you'll get those in your email probably later today. So let me turn on my screen share. All right. Okay, you should be seeing my workflows. Please say something if not. But I'm going to move this window over and I'm going to open a chat window too so I can see if anyone asks any questions there. Okay. So the first wizard, though, that I am going to spend some time in is the item search and display wizard, which is available in the circulation module under the common tasks group. If you happen to also have a cataloger login, there's item search and display wizards kind of all over the place. It's a thing you need to do frequently. So, and I'm guessing since neither of you are super duper brand new, that you've probably had a fair amount of experience with this. So hopefully I won't be repeating too many things that you already know. And if you have, though, since we are in that position where you aren't super duper brand new, if you do have any tips or anything to share that you have found very helpful as we go along, feel free to jump in with that. So when you open the wizard, though, depending on, depending on your internet speed, it will play a role in how fast you're able to open the wizard. There we go. Depending on the preferences on your local workflows install, you may open directly to this advanced search view, or you may get, I don't know, what I think of as the classic search. This is the one I'm kind of most used to because it was sort of the one that was in workflows when I started working at the library, and this was what our computers always defaulted to when I worked at Peoria. So I'm most used to this, but this one is also great. So I am going to start with my personal preference, though, and just show you kind of some of the options you have here. So you've got your search field where you enter, whatever search terms you desire. You've also got your list of different indexes that you can search. You've got your library selection menu here, and then you've got your type options over on the right under the search button. So I'm going to go ahead and do a keyword search just to kind of show you how it works. I'm going to do a keyword search for Conan in title. And you can see that we've got, we've got a lot of different things. We've got Conan in various places in the title. We've got some titles that don't even include Conan in the title, but if you look down in the description, you can kind of see that there's a variant title of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. So that's where it's getting, why it's putting that in those results. So because we're doing a keyword search right now, it's looking anywhere in the title and title field. Sometimes you'll even find it, something in the table of contents will sometimes pop up in your search results if those terms are in like a chapter title. So this is not to say that keyword searches are not useful. It just depends on what you know and how you're looking for it. And in this case, finding there's not actually one single thing called Conan. So, but there's Conan the Barbarian. So if I wanted to find Conan the Barbarian, I was hoping to find the Conan movie, I might want to try a browse search instead, because this will generate me results that begin with Conan. So I'm going to get Conan by Roy Thomas. I'm going to get this one because it's got kind of that subtitle thing going on. And we've got the, things beginning with that kind of followed by the subtitles. So that can sometimes make it a little bit easier to filter through. Although in this situation, this might actually be a time that advanced search might be preferable, because maybe I'm looking for Conan, not Conana, but I specifically want like the Robert E. Howard Conan, not the, Robert Jordan or any of the various other authors, or I don't want to get mixed up in any Sherlock Holmes stuff, or I don't want to find things about like Late Night with Conan O'Brien. So I could, put Howard in as the author and title as Conan, because one of the nice things about the advanced search is that you can enter search terms in multiple different, indexes kind of at the same time. So you will notice we still get some different authors, probably because there's a reference to Robert E. Howard's Conan, or, in the author it's based on by Robert E. Howard or something like that. And we are still getting, some of the Conan Doyle. So it just kind of depends. Depending on what you've got, sometimes you'll get better or worse results. But to return to this, though, I'm going to show you just another couple of things with keyword versus browse. A time keyword can come in really handy is sometimes, you have people who can remember a partial title or words from the title, but aren't really quite sure how they go together. Like one that works really great is, when Where the Crawdads Sing was the top thing on everyone's list. Sometimes you'd have people come to the info desk and be like, I need a book for my book club. What's the title? It's something about crawdads. Sometimes you can, throw that out there and hope you get it. Or, you're working with a child who wants the newest Captain Underpants book, and you're like, well, what's it called? And they're like, I don't know, it's the one about Professor Poopy Pants, which of course is in fact, you know, a Captain Underpants book, as I was just guessing one day in a training, and I typed Poopy Pants in hoping I'd get a Captain Underpants, and I did. So, you can kind of get, so if you have partial titles, things like that, keyword searches can be really great. But then, sometimes maybe the beginning of a title, or you know, things like that, maybe it has a weird subtitle, or you're like, well, this kid wants the newest Captain Underpants, but he doesn't know which one. Then you could do a browse search for just Captain Underpants, and then you can kind of scroll through all the different, sort of individual titles. So depending on what you've got. Another thing that can be a little weird about it, every now and then you'll search for something and you'll get results that just flat out don't make any sense. So I'll use God's Not Dead as an example. If you're familiar with this work, there's not only a book, there's also a movie, there's multiple movies, in fact, there's multiple books, there's devotionals based on the books and movies. And yet, when we search for the title God's Not Dead, it is nowhere in our search results. The keyword search in workflows is a Boolean search. So it is treating words like and, not, and or as operators. So it's basically, by searching this way, you're basically telling it to exclude the exact thing that you want to find. You can defeat it either by putting that in quotes, or you can change the search type to browse, because browse is just looking for the words you gave it. It's not applying any, things. Another thing you can run into is if you have a title that somehow starts with an operator, like and the band played on, it just can't even search in keyword. You'll get that error in query. So if you kind of don't, as soon as you know why it's doing it, it's like, oh, well, this makes sense. But if it's the first time you encounter it, or you haven't had to search for books for a while, and you're just like, why on earth can I not find this thing? Why can't it even search? That's why. And it's just change the search type, and there you go. So that's kind of one of the fun little quirks of it all. Which once you know it's doing it, though, you could probably leverage that, if you're getting, let me see if I can make this actually work. If I do a keyword, so, Conan, not Doyle, that excludes all of my Arthur Conan Doyle stuff. So you can also leverage it to be really helpful if you want. So I wonder if I can do multiple, if I can do not Doyle and not O'Brien. I can, apparently, and it got rid of Conan O'Brien as well. So very cool. Anyway, you also do have this added kind of filters that you can apply. The icon is supposed to be a pair of binoculars with like a pickaxe and a hammer. But if you click on that, it opens this little pop-up window with all of your different search options. So you could narrow it down by publication year, The format, this is like catalog format, so most of the time you probably don't need to narrow it down by that, but your item types, if you know that, home location, and all your cataloging categories, you could also narrow it down by those. I'd say most of the time it's probably cat 3 that's going to be the most useful one to use, because that is kind of the materials format thing. So you could say like, okay, yeah, I want the Conan movies instead. So if we do that and then search again, then we get down to like, you'll see video discs or video recording in the thing. Does bring up one other thing that I like to go over in the training, is you'll notice that the format is listed in a couple of different places, and you'll kind of notice that right around 2008 is where it goes from one method to the other. From 2008 on, it's listing the carrier type video disc to indicate that it's a movie, and from before 2008, it's got a general materials descriptor in brackets. This is because there was a change in catalog standards right around then, which was also right when I was taking cataloging in grad school. So I was very upset about it, because they were teaching AACR2 while telling us that we would not need to know this in about a year. So I was very frustrated. But anyway, under the old cataloging rules, you use the general materials descriptor, and under the new, you use video disc. So if you are trying to find something in a specific format, though, just be aware that depending on the age of the thing, you may need to look both places. You can also, though, use that added filter field for languages, which can be really handy if you have someone who's looking specifically for something. We used to have people come into Peoria and say, either I'm trying to learn this language and I, want books in it, or, English is not my first language and I want to read a book in my native language, So sometimes you could, we would have people who were trying to like, learn Spanish or something, and we're looking for a book in Spanish to practice. So I could, kind of narrow my results down for that. Conan's probably not going to be a great result there, but all the same. But you could do a search that way. Another thing that you can do, which can be kind of fun, is, you can do call number searches. Call number searches, you do have to select a specific library. I used to kind of do this sometimes if I were looking for books on a specific topic, but like for whatever reason, I was searching from home or not, on a laptop in a meeting and trying to play on a story time or something like that. And I'd be like, okay, what do we have in the 398.2s? So if you do that, you could do and kind of get basically a shelf list of what's on your shelf, which could also be a handy way to do a little bit of light weeding or very quick sort of, what's the word I'm thinking of? But if you were doing some planning on a topic, sometimes getting that shelf list might actually be easier than physically walking out to the shelf, or maybe you're planning ahead and wanting to get some holds or something. So let's see, what else can you do? You can search just general fields as well, and that you can that would be if I were trying to do like an ISBN search or something. I'd try to drop that in a general field search. Subject searches are also great and delightful. This is another one where keyword versus browse makes a huge difference. I don't know why I always do tigers, but I do. Oh, I'm still in Spanish. So that is one thing that those added search filters don't automatically clear after the search. So you have to remember to go ahead and manually clear them if you're still in the same window, or you could just open a new window. But anyway, if we do a subject search for tigers, we just get things with tigers somewhere in the subject field. So we get, Detroit Tigers, we get Tigers Anywhere. For some reason, we get Gerald the Lion, even though lions and tigers aren't the same. I don't know. We get a bunch of stuff. If we change tigers to browse, though, we get a cross-reference A that says we should have searched tiger. And then we've got, kind of the big heading for tiger. And then we've got this one with all of the narrower terms. And then you can kind of look through too and see, you can all see all the different tiger subject headings. So, tiger attacks, tiger beetles, tiger conservation, all of this sort of stuff. So if you kind of aren't sure, sometimes with Dewey, it's a little hard to predict like what the official Dewey subject term is going to be, because some of it is, let's face it, a little bit dated. So there's sometimes that it's just a little bit harder to guess what the official subject term in use is, but doing kind of a broad search and then getting into the subject heading thesaurus this way can be kind of a handy way to narrow it down and try to figure out what you can find. Another thing that is nice though is in the description, all of these blue underlined things are links, so you can, if you want to find the, other things in that series, you can click on that, or you can click on, sorry, I went too far back. Let me go forward again. You can, click on one of your subject terms to find related, other things that share that subject term. So all these things can be useful tools. So I'm just going to kind of click on one. You'll have a couple of tabs at the bottom. Depending on which type of search you're using, this will kind of vary a little bit, but most of the time you'll have, kind of a description and a call number and item tab. And under the call number and item one, you can get a little bit more info, but if you go to detailed display, of course, you get a lot more information. Most of the time, I would just use like the bibliographic tab and the call number and item tab. Call number and item though is great because it includes like when it was created, last checkout date, last activity date, if it's ever been inventoried, all of your, basic cataloging categories here, any notes on the item. And then you've also got like circ info, when it was last checked out, last renewed, if there's renewals remaining, that kind of thing. And if anyone has any current bills on it, or if anyone currently has it checked out, or you can see kind of the holds queue for it, all this sort of stuff. And you'll notice down at the bottom, you can kind of narrow your displays of all of these by, the library, and like in bills, you could go through and show paid bills on it and stuff like that. So just depending on what you need, you can kind of do a lot. So that is basically the item search and display helper. So I'm going to move on to the holds wizards now. So the first one is the place hold wizard. And if I click that, you'll notice that the last thing I was looking up in the item search and display is kind of auto-filled in here as the current item. So that can be nice if you've been looking something up for somebody and you're like, we found what they want. Unfortunately, my library doesn't own it. I'm going to need to place a hold. Then you can bounce right over to the place hold wizard, select it, fill it in, and not have to do any searching. Another thing you can do though is if someone comes up and is going, hey, I'm looking for a book on this, do you have anything? And you're kind of like, we don't have a ton of automotive repair manuals here. I bet I'm going to need to place a hold. You could just go ahead and open your place hold wizard and use the item search and display helper, which is up at the top in your little bank of helpers. So if you click that, that opens a pop-up window. The main difference is that you don't have that advanced search option where you can, search by multiple fields at the same time. But you do have your regular search with your keyword browse exact, and you still have your filters here too. So you can do almost everything you can do in the other search. So I don't know, I went with automotive manual, so we'll do, okay, so we want a Chilton's auto repair manual, why not? You will kind of see I'm in a keyword, search right now. You'll notice it's kind of got the list of number of copies over here, which if you're placing a hold is something you will often want to tune into. This is probably a bad example. Let me do something more common. If you're looking for Moby Dick, for example, you're going to have a bunch of different records, and of course only some of them are going to be the Herman Melville. But when you make a selection, if you have multiple options of the thing you want, sometimes you'll have, especially something like a classic. Well, here. You can also sort by the different columns by clicking on the column header. Let me scroll down to the Herman Melville. Like I'm going to have multiple options for Moby Dick by Herman Melville. We're going to have multiple editions, things like that. I'm probably not, unless I can't avoid it, going to want to choose one with only one copy on the record. I'm going to want to go for one with, and I am going to kind of want to keep an eye on this call number and item down here just to kind of see what those locations are. Because if you're seeing a ton of just like stacks, that's probably not necessarily a good sign because those can sometimes be storage locations or, you know, our stacks at Peoria used to be in the basement, and it would be kind of a back room that most of the stuff that was in there was actually truly lost. You know, and you probably also want to keep a little bit of an eye on a publication year, because something that was published in, you know, a 1941 might not be in great shape anymore. So, but once you pick one, you know that, oh, that's a, you also, especially with classics, want to keep an eye out for things that are graphic classics and, you know, abridged versions, because that's an awkward conversation when someone comes to pick up their copy of, you know, Moby Dick, and you hand them a little, you know, graphic novel, and they go, this isn't what I wanted. So all those different things that you kind of have to keep an eye on, and that's part of why that description tab is right there, so you can see those adaptation notes and, you know, things like that. And that, you know, sometimes even just looking at the physical description is a good tip off, because there's no way that there's a copy of the full version of Moby Dick that's 62 pages long unless you're using very small font. But anyway, so find one. Let's see. Make sure it looks like the thing you really want. That looks pretty promising. You're not going to abridge. Yeah, complete and unabridged. There we go. Okay. So then once you find the thing that you want, you can click on one of these if for some reason you want a specific copy. Most of the time, though, it doesn't matter which one you select. Just click place hold. It's going to fill in an item ID. That does not necessarily mean that that's the one you're getting. That just means that, you know, depending on how you place the hold, mind you, we're doing a title level hold, I should say at this point. And that with a title level hold, that just means that it's telling the system that I want a book on the same record as this book. And then you can enter your user ID. You do, of course, have your user search helper at the top. So if you don't have the card in front of you, you can still look the user up. Or if you do have their card, you can go ahead and place the, you know, put that info in, and it will pull up any notes and things like that that you have. And so then below, you do have a lot of options. You have your pickup location. This should, in theory, be defaulting to your own library. But if it is for some reason not, or for some reason this patron wants to pick it up at a different location, you can change that there just by selecting the library. 99.9% of the time, I'd say you don't need to mess with the expiration date. This just tells the system how long to keep looking for the item if it can't find it right away. The system default is 300 days. Most of the time you find a copy for them within like 14 days. So most of the time it's not relevant. There was one time we were looking for a book of like cello music for somebody, and it did actually almost take the 300 days by the time the library found their copy of it. But most of the time you can ignore it. You can add comments to it, which I used to do a lot when I was like using holds to pre-plan like story times and stuff, you know, because sometimes you want to work on it when you have time. So you could put a comment that was like, oh yeah, this one was for the science sleuths about, you know, magnets. This one was for the story time about this, you know, so that could kind of give yourself a little bit of a indicator of why you wanted it. I would say, especially if you're doing something where you're not so much placing a hold for a patron, but placing a hold for yourself. Like sometimes you have to place a hold on something because there's a problem with it, or, you know, it needs repair, that type of thing. You definitely probably want to put a comment in on that, because if you do that kind of thing a lot, then you end up with a pile of books on your desk and you can't remember why on earth you wanted them. Suspension, this would be kind of the most common use is the scenario where you're placing a hold for a patron and they say, oh wait, I'm going to be out of town. What happens if the hold comes in while I'm gone? You could say, oh, well, when will you be gone? And enter those as suspension dates. And that basically stops it from coming while they can't get it. The other handy use for this is, again, for pre-planning programs. If you, you know, are trying to work ahead and planning your story times or something like that, you could, you know, sit down and place all your holds when you have time, and then set the suspension date for today, and then unsuspend for a week before you actually need it. So if you're doing a display, you're doing a, you know, an event or something, you can go ahead and place those holds in advance that way. The level and the range, this is kind of the part where you tell it whether you want this specific item ID that you've chosen, or whether it can be any of the items on that same record. Most of the time, again, you're going to leave that as a title level hold, because most of the time you don't want to choose a specific one. You want whichever one you can get for that patron the fastest. But again, sometimes in the situation where you're placing a hold because there's a problem with an item, you probably do want to do a copy level hold because you're probably trying to investigate a problem on a specific copy. Or maybe you're pre-planning an event and you know you're going to need to hang on to the item for a little bit longer, so you don't want to tie up someone else's, so you want to place a hold on your library's copy, things like that. Or maybe there's 2 items on a record and you got one in for a patron and the disc turned out to be broken, so you want to place a copy level hold on the other one so you can send the other one back. Things like that. But again, 99% of the time you're probably just going to leave it as title and move on. The range, again, this one is going to be one where you're most of the time going to leave it at system. The exceptions to that would be if your library doesn't share an item type, say, for example. Like, I'll use Washington as an example because you have a branch, so you'll be a good example for this. Like, I can't remember your circ rule, so this might be accurate or it might not, but let's say Washington does not share their new movies. But you still have a patron who wants to place a movie on the I don't even know what movies are out, on whatever the hot new movie is. So you place a hold, but you're only going to be able to fill it with one of your own because, you know, according to the rules, no one should send you the others, and even if you get it, you're supposed to send it back. So you don't want to bother to place a system level hold because you're just going to get stuff you can't use. But you could, at Washington, place a group level hold, which would mean you could get it from other libraries within your group, which is Washington and Washington Sunnyland. So, or like in Peoria, for example, you could get it from another Peoria branch. If you narrow it down to library, then it means that only items from your library can fill it, which a lot of the time means is basically functionally the same as placing a copy level hold, but sometimes you do have multiple copies of the same thing. You know, sometimes you get duplicates. You do like a Peoria Reads book or something and you get 16 copies of it. So you could narrow it that way. So those are just different ways to narrow it down. Like I said, most of the time title and system are the way to go, but if it is something that's going to be one of those kind of different restrictions, then that's how you finagle that. Recall status, all I will say about recall status is please don't use it. Doesn't work right. I mean, it's not that it doesn't work right, it's that it doesn't work right in our system. Basically, we're not the type of library for which recalls are useful. I think maybe something that's used more in an academic library setting. Basically what it does is if you place a hold and say recall now, then if someone has that item checked out, it will change their due date to today, and their item will suddenly be overdue, basically. But it doesn't send them any kind of notice. It doesn't send the library any kind of notice. No one knows that this due date has magically changed, so they don't get it back any faster. All that happens is that they get really mad if they log into the catalog and see it, basically. So it just doesn't do what people want. If you are in a situation where like you need to get your library's copy of something back quickly, the best way to do it is just to place a copy level hold on it, which will block renewals. At the end of the day, we can't. There's no way to make the patron bring it back. Basically, all we could do is block renewals, and then they start accruing fines or whatever. Although you're both fine free, but you know what I mean. It basically that's kind of the best you can do is just say I'm sorry, I can't renew it for you anymore. The last option you have on this screen is this make hold first in queue. What that does is if you click that and you place a hold on an item and there's a holds queue, that it does what it says. It moves this to the very top of the list. I file this under for emergencies only. I would say please don't use it on a regular basis. And I would also say that the patron emergency of I should have been working on my paper before and now it's due in 3 days, I wouldn't file that under the type of emergency. I mean, that's sort of you kind of should have planned ahead a little bit more. This is more kind of we got a copy in for this patron and it is falling apart, and so I'm going to need to place a new hold on it for them, but due to library error, like there's kind of a library mistake in the mix, so I don't want them to have to wait through the whole holds queue again because of something that was ultimately our error. That's that sort of thing. you know, in that case, I would maybe do it. Or oops, I somehow entered the barcode in discharge so the item thinks it's ready, you know, or some things like that. You know, I've somehow accidentally filled the hold when it wasn't really filled or something. Then I would maybe use make hold first in queue if replacing it. Or in the situation where you think there's a problem with an item, so you need to see it before you can let it go back out. I mean, we would have that happen where, like, we'd have an audiobook and someone would return one disc of an audiobook and be like, oops, I returned this last week, I still had this disc, and there's a holds queue going. Then you might want to place a copy level hold for yourself, make that first in queue so it gets routed back to you so you can put the missing disc back in it before it goes to another patron. That's the type of situation it's for. But anyway, that basically sums it up though, and then we just click place hold, and you have a few options. You can place a hold for another user, which just clears everything out. You can place another hold for this user, which keeps the user info in and just allows you to place a new hold. You can remove the hold. You'd be surprised how often you have to do. You go to all the placing a hold and the patron says, you know what, never mind. Modify the hold as well. That gives you options to change suspension dates and add a new note or something if you've forgotten. And then just to close out of the wizard. So that's basically that. I'm going to go ahead and close out, and then I'm just going to show you a little bit about just kind of how the holds appear on the user account and how to kind of get more info, make more changes. So I'm going to go up to users and going to open a display user wizard and pull up this account, which I have my pop-up alert set, so I get all of my notes as pop-ups and, you know, all of that. If I go to the holds tab, I will see my holds, I will see its status, you know. The status that you'll see is basically, it's a binary of available / unavailable. I think maybe you'd see suspended as well. Unavailable just means not ready yet. Not that it will not be able to be gotten. And of course, whenever you have this little like dotted underline under something, that means you can select it. And that just basically opens a little pop-up window with more info. You do also have your right-click functions in this list though. So if you right-click, say, on title, you get some different options here. You could edit a note, you could modify the hold, you could remove the hold, that sort of thing. Again, reorder hold queue is not something I would suggest doing. I don't even know if that pops up as an option for everyone. That might also just be because I'm like logged in as an admin. I'm not sure if that's available to everyone, but I would not suggest doing it because I could see that being a way to make a lot of patrons very angry. And then there's also some libraries used to bill people for unpicked up holds. So if you had a practice like that, that would be what that is for. I don't think anyone's doing that anymore though, so, you know. I always think it's a little odd that place hold is also available there, but it is. You could place a duplicate hold on that if you wanted to, which every now and then, sometimes someone needs multiple copies and you could just use the RSA override to do that. And so that's basically that. You do also, in the holds menu, you have some of these options as well. You've got your display user holds option, which basically does the same thing. It just only shows you that tab of the display user wizard. Modify holds is, again, basically the same thing. It's just that pop-up where you can modify the suspension dates and stuff. If we wanted to remove a hold, you just basically enter the user. You can pick and choose which ones you want to remove and all of that. So another thing, though, that is maybe a little bit more interesting, though, is this display title holds. If you need to find out kind of what's the situation with this title, how many holds are there, what's going on with it, I'm going to use something that I know will have a bunch of holds on it. Hopefully I'm still right about this. This is the problem with not working in the library anymore, is I don't know what the popular things are. Okay, yeah, that should. Okay, so if I wanted to see all the holds on this, if I go to display title holds, it'll give me kind of just an overview. I mean, I can see the holds queue, and you know, some are available, some are unavailable, some are suspended. But the thing that I kind of really like is just this big high-level overview of it here. Is there's 71 total items. Of those 71, 65 are holdable. You know, there are 67 total title level holds. There's 52 system range holds. You know, so some of those other holds have been or different ranges, types, things like that. So it just kind of gives you kind of a good overview of what's going on. Which to me, this is kind of the most useful thing when you have a patron who's got a hold on a popular item and wants to know how long it will take. This can at least be kind of a way to say, it'll probably be pretty soon, or, ooh, this, I don't know if either of you were in libraries when 50 Shades of Grey was the hot thing, but there were something like 800 holds on that and like 15 items. So when we'd look at that, we could be like, yeah, it's going to be a while. You're going to want to find someone else to read, something else to read in the meantime. And really though, unfortunately, that's kind of the most you can tell. You can't say, oh yes, it'll be this long, or that item is going to be returned on this date, and then it will definitely be for you. Because the way holds work is that all of the libraries in RSA are set up so that their own items prioritize their own patrons. So if a Galesburg item is returned in 15 minutes, the next Galesburg person in the queue is, way down on the list. I'm still scrolling and looking for a Galesburg person. Well, actually, there might not be a Galesburg person on this list. So in that case, it would probably fill the Kiwani hold. But like, say, let me see. Okay, Peoria Heights. Okay, there's definitely a Peoria Heights person on the list. If their item is returned in 15 minutes, they might be number 8 or whatever on the holds queue, but it's a Peoria Heights item, so it's going to jump to that person. Even if that item is not returned at Peoria Heights, if someone had a Peoria Heights book that they'd gotten on hold at like Quincy or something, if they return it at Quincy in 15 minutes, it's going to route it to Peoria Heights for this patron because they're a Peoria Heights user and it's their book, basically. So that's one of the things that makes it a little bit complicated. And of course, quarantine makes this even more complicated because, of course, that might have to sit at Peoria Heights, whereas meanwhile, someone, might return Quincy's item at Peoria Heights and, would have been easier just to trade. But that's, normally it works pretty well. It's just things are complex right now. But so because of that, though, it just makes it harder to predict how long it's going to take to get any one book for somebody. Most of the time, my response was, holds normally take about a week or so to come in, maybe 2 or 3 if it's like a super duper popular item. That was kind of what I would tell people. These days, you probably want to say maybe it'll take about 2 weeks to come in and, a bit longer if it's a popular item. But again, that's sort of how that works. And to me, that's sort of the best way to get a good idea of what's coming in. Let's see. Okay, so that's basically kind of all of the requesting stuff. You can also display item holds. Usually, since there's less copy level hold action going on, you usually don't see as big a list, but that Moby Dick that I had, you can see my 2 holds on it. There are also, of course, the on-shelf items wizard. So if you are, so this is kind of more the outgoing hold scenario where you're the person who is pulling materials to be sent to other libraries and to other patrons or for your own patrons. So we've kind of covered the requesting items end, and now this is kind of the fulfilling holds end. Your on-shelf items list, when you first open it, it's going to default to your own library. Since I'm at the East Peoria, RSA library, I don't have anything in my list. But fortunately, I can see other libraries' pick lists. Let's see who probably hasn't gotten to all of theirs yet. Let's try Fond du Lac. They're pretty busy. Okay, good. So this will be a list of all the items that are on a given library shelf that need to be pulled to fill holds. Of course, you also get your pick list emailed to your Gmail accounts. Those go out at 5 a.m. and at noon. And this is basically populated by a report that runs at 5 a.m. and at noon. And then we also added one that's running at like 4 in the afternoon. We're not sending that one via email, but we are running it so that this list refreshes, basically. And so that way you get the list of all the stuff that needs to be pulled from your shelves. You can sort it again by the different column headers. So by call number, or, by type or location if that's more convenient to you as you go through. You can also export it. There is this little export list at the top. I haven't found that option I've had issues with it just kind of messing up the columns when I try to export that way. To me, the easier way is just to click one, then shift and down arrow to select the whole thing, and then Control C, and then just open up which of course is going to open in the wrong window, but let me move it over, and then just Control V it into Excel, and then you can adjust your column headers and stuff to make it pretty and sort however you want. So to me, that can be a lot easier though than the list in the Gmail for one, because this gives you more sorting ability, especially if it's a really big list. But anyway, we won't save that. So, and then you do, you again, if you are looking for this thing and you're like, I need to know a little bit more, you can, click on that. Or if you need to know something about the user, you can click on their user ID. Most of the time, all the info, is kind of already covered. But so that's the on-shelf items list. You do have the option. I mean, I don't right now because I'm looking at a libraries list that I'm not logged in as. But if you're looking at your own libraries list, you'll notice there's this trap hold for selected copy. So you could click that to go ahead and trap the hold. It's not my recommendation, A, because to me it's not easier than just going to the trap holds wizard and scanning a barcode. But B, if you happen to have something where you've got multiple copies of something and you've grabbed the wrong one, it will think the wrong item is en route, basically. So that's the other thing that I caution against. So normally though, you grab this list, you go out to your shelves, you pull all your items, and then you come back and open the trap holds wizard and just start scanning the barcodes, and it'll generate your routing labels and tell you where to send it and all that good stuff. So that's basically kind of the fulfilling holds part of the game. There are some like little detail exciting things about like, oh, if it's a, what to do if it's a share Illinois hold, or if it's a hold for a union lister, or things like that, where instead of trapping and transiting the item, you check it out to the user ID. I'll include the cheat sheet about that in the kind of list of sort of follow-up documents that, just so you have that for reference for when those situations do come up. But those are really kind of the only surprises. Of course, sometimes you'll also go to trap holds and, it'll say no holds found for item, and that just basically means that another copy's already, filled it or something like that. So, all right. Any questions, any comments, any tips you have to share that I didn't catch on my own? Okay. All right. I'm gonna spend just a little bit of time with the place research hold, place blanket hold, place book club hold. No one can quite agree on what this wizard is called. We call it place research hold in the menu, but the Circe Dynix name is actually place blanket hold. So the wizard with a million names. The goal, though, of this wizard is that it is meant to be an easier way to kind of place multiple holds on the same title. So like I need to get 12 copies of the same thing for my book club. I need to get a classroom set of, Bridge to Terabithia for, whatever. So I need multiple copies. And as you probably saw briefly, I kind of glossed over it, but if you try to place a duplicate hold in the normal place holds wizard, you have to put in an override to say, yes, I know I already have a hold. And it's, for one or two, it's not bad, but if you imagine doing it 20 times, then suddenly it's a huge pain in the rear. So this makes it a little bit easier. Let me start again though. So we open the wizard, choose a user ID or enter a user ID, blaze through all the notices and stuff. But the thing you won't want to click through is you do have this pop-up window that will pop up, kind of every time you start placing a hold. And it's got this option for a blanket ID. You just want to leave that at new. And then you'll want to say, how many copies do you need? So let's say we need 10 copies. And then your pickup location. And Unlike in the regular holds wizard, you do actually have to enter an expiration date, because this wizard is assuming that you need these 10 copies of something for something specific. You need it for a book club, you need it for a lesson, there's a specific start date or whatever that you need these items by. And also, because you're requesting these multiple copies, it kind of wants to know when to stop requesting them. So let's say I don't know, I'm doing a Halloween book club that meets on Halloween, and for some reason I need these books right for that day. I don't know. The other thing that's a little bit different is, depending on how you're placing the hold, you are more likely to be doing a copy level hold in this. If you want multiple copies of the same thing, you're going to want to choose copy hold. Because otherwise it'll get one from that title and it will be like, hey, I did it, I'm done, yay me. And that's not what you want. You want to get all those different copies. So, and again, I will be sending you a cheat sheet, because I know this one's kind of weird just because it is so different from the regular place hold. It's kind of like the opposite of that. You could do a title level hold if you're doing kind of truly a research hold where you're wanting multiple books on the same subject but different titles. Then you could leave it as title. But in this scenario, we want 10 copies of, I don't know, whatever I'm going to pick, which remains a mystery even to me. Range, though, you can still leave that at system, and again, don't mess with recall. And then say okay. So then it kind of looks a little bit more familiar from here. You go up to your item search and display. I guess I will do bridge to Terabithia since I said it. We'll do a browse. Okay. Ah, I spelled Terabithia wrong. That's my problem. Okay. Okay. And again, you will really, in this case, want to look out for those ones with a lot of titles, or I mean, a lot of records on the title. So like this one with 21, I only need 10. That should be pretty good. So then go over to the call number tab. Oh, that's a video. I don't want a video. Let's see. Volume. There's only 2. Maybe I need to go back further. That looks promising. Okay. Okay, so you will want to choose them. If one is marked missing, you do not want to choose that one. So just kind of start going down the list and just, okay, that one, add to list, and then you have to click add to list again, and you'll notice it starts filling in. And then from there, you can kind of just keep add to list, just kind of bouncing down that list. Add to list, add to list. And, you know, so this, it's not instant, you know, but it is a lot faster than restarting it as a whole new hold and entering the override every single time. So normally, I said I wanted 10. Normally, I would choose like 12 or 13 items here, because the way this hold is set up, as soon as 10 arrive for me, it's going to automatically cancel the remaining holds, so I won't get more than I need. So normally, though, I would choose 12 or 13 in case some of them error out, or the library can't find it, or, you know, gets checked out before they get to grab it or something. But for training purposes, I'm going to stop it at 6. And then once you're done, though, you just click. And oh, this may also be a scenario where you might want to add a comment, though, you know, for Susan's book club, you know, things like that. But then just click place blanket hold, and it will give you any error messages. You'll get some holds not allowed. That is one where the RSA override will not work. We do have a super secret override, but we don't really give it out because most of the time you're just still not going to get the item because the library is just not going to send it. So it's one where, yes, there's an override, but there's not much point in it. So just click don't place hold. And then it'll just give you like a little kind of confirmation screen where it says, okay, we selected 6, but only 5 were placed, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. And then just to show you, though, it does display different. So if you go into the user display and go to holds, you'll see that I've got my 2 holds on Moby Dick, but then I've got this blanket ID, and then all those holds that I was able to place are kind of grouped together under that, which also, if you have someone who's like managing a lot of book clubs, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of keep up with their account and sort of see, you know, what they've got going on. So that is the Place Research Holds wizard. Any questions? All right. Okay. Well, we made it through pretty much all the wizards in the Holds group. Let's see. Just since I wrapping a little bit early, I'm like, well, let me, just in case there's something else I can go over. But I think also probably people tend to not mind too much if I end a training slightly early. So anything else that you either of you have had questions on that you would like to go over that you haven't had a chance to ask, or no? Okay. Well, thank you both very much for attending. I will be trying to get this training posted hopefully before the end of the day, because I just posted some other stuff too. So I was going to send a listserv post with links to, recent, recordings and stuff. And I will send just to you to, I will send you the links to various, holds related cheat sheets and things like that I mentioned, so that you'll have those for your own reference after the fact. But other than that, I will let you go. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.